Hey everyone, and welcome to this Admissionado webinar. My name is Stephen Black. I'll be presenting you with the Insider's Guide to Ivy League Admissions. This is where I tell you what admissions committees at Ivy League schools are looking for, and then how you can create the perfect application that meets their standards. First, I want to tell you a little bit about me. So I graduated from Harvard in 2007. Harvard was a school that I never thought I would get into. I didn't totally understand the process when I was applying, but I created a fantastic application and got in and found myself lucky enough to be one of the 1,600 students in the class of 2007. After graduating, I was schooled by the Harvard Admissions Committee. I was interested in working for them and interested in continuing my connection with Harvard, giving back, as they say, which I'll get to later. And so I went to various seminars and info sessions where they explained the entire admissions process to me in full. And now currently I conduct applicant interviews for the admissions office. So that means each year in the area that I live in, I'll get a certain number of interviews. I conduct these interviews and then I write lengthy interview reports, submit them to the admissions office, and these become part of the applicant's application and part of the admissions file and factor into the decision. So let's get to it. So the big question that everybody has about Ivy League schools, because they're real intimidating, is can I really get in? Right? So the good news is, yes, you can get in. The bad news is it's a little complicated, right? It's not the easiest to understand process. So the first thing you have to know is that the numbers are stacked against you. This is an intimidating factor for sure, but it's one that you can get over. This just means that there are more applicants every year. So more applicants every year means the admissions rates go down. So Harvard had 30,000 applicants 2 years ago, and then this year they have something like 36,000 applicants, and they're still accepting the same amount of students. The biggest thing is you have to rise above the numbers game. You cannot be intimidated by it, or else you will just freak out before you even really get into the process. And the application is your chance to rise above the numbers game. It's your chance to show the admissions committee that you are a unique and valuable person and that you will add to their college community. And so my role in this whole process, and hopefully in this presentation, is I want to demystify the process for you, right? I just told you the bad news, it's complicated, so I'm going to uncomplicate it for you. I'm going to make you understand that it is a process that is not scary and crazy intimidating, and that if you do it right, you can really increase your chances of admission. So that's what I'll do, is uncomplicate everything. So the first question, and this is an important question, is who reads my application? The admissions committee at Admissionado, we like to refer to them as the AdCom. So everybody's always usually really intimidated by the thought of these admissions committees. After all, they're the ones who are, controlling your destiny. They're deciding whether you can get into the school or not. But the one thing I'd like to bring up is they're not automatons. They're not machines. I've met many admissions committees, and they're considerate, compassionate, intelligent people. They are really the people that you would want reading your applications. They care. They care about you as a person. They care about you as an applicant. So who are on these admissions committees? Oftentimes it's graduates of the university. In a lot of cases, it's recent graduates. I have 3 friends from college from the class of 2007 who are currently on the admissions committee at Harvard. Or there are people who have worked in the admissions office for years. I know Harvard has at least 3 or 4 people who have been with them for 30 or 40 years and watched the process evolve and have really been there for the entire thing. So with these admissions committees, emotional appeal is important. We call this the soft sell. So this means selling yourself as more than just a number or some statistics on pages. This means selling yourself as a person, because look, you're selling yourself to people, not thoughtless automatons. These are people who are um, emotional people, so you need to appeal to their emotional side. So how it works at most admissions committees is one or two members will quickly read your application, and I say quickly because they have many, many to go through. And if there's something there that they like, they present it to the rest of the committee in a sort of open debate style format. They'll present, here's John Smith's application. John Smith did such and such. His essays are about this, and they will argue over admission. And what they're ultimately deciding is if you're a good fit for their university, if you're a fit for what they're looking for, if you're going to be part of the Harvard, the Princeton, the Yale community, that's what they're deciding. So next, in the question that you have inevitably is, am I good enough for the Ivy League? And that's a fair question. It's a question that I hear a lot. It's a question that I certainly had when I was applying. So the one thing I want to stress is you can't let an unqualified third party make this decision for you, because nobody really knows you better than you, right? And so if you seek out advice and somebody just takes a quick look at you and a quick look at your stats, and they tell you a definitive yes or no, then they're probably not making an informed decision. So these application advisors, they tend to be predatory. They don't have kids' best interests in mind. They want to make a buck, right? They want to make money off of telling you whether or not you're good enough and then what you should do, and they're oftentimes going to give you bad advice. So that's your typical application advisor. And one thing that they do is they paint kids into a corner, right? So you'll approach them with your potential application, and they'll tell you, this is what you are, and this is what kind of schools you should apply to. And that's just not true. That's not true for anyone, because it's something fit for a university. When you're talking about if you fit there or not, it's something that's so subjective. And if they're just telling you these declarative statements, chances are they've got some ulterior motive behind it, and that's not really a good ulterior motive. And usually they push you towards mediocre schools. And what that means is they're going to push you towards schools that they think maybe that you can get into, or they have some kind of personal relationship with. And why do they do this? Why do these bad application advisors do this? The reason's twofold. So first, right, it makes their job easier. Even if you're a smart kid who comes to them with great SAT scores, a potential essay, everything like that, it's easier for them to have you fill out applications to mediocre schools because those take less time, and it makes their job easier, and they don't have to worry about creating this Ivy League application with you. And the second thing is it makes them look good when you get into these mediocre schools, right? When you get into a mediocre school with a 60% acceptance rate, which the person knows you're obviously probably overqualified for, it makes them look like they gave you good advice, right? They told you to go to school X, you get into school X, everybody's happy. But the bad thing is you're going to end up going to a school that you're way overqualified for. And the worst thing of all that these admissions advisors do is they tell you that getting into an Ivy League school is impossible. And frankly, that's just not the case. It's just sort of an insane thing that they tell people just to take the load off of their mind, because they don't feel like they're qualified enough to help their applicants get in. So let's talk about admissions rates before we go any further, because the reason that these admissions advisors say, oh, hey, this is impossible, is because admissions rates are lower than ever. Okay, the lowest of the Ivies is Harvard. They had a 6.17 admit rate last year. Like I said before, it's just a matter of more and more students applying. When 30,000 applied 2 years ago, and this year they have 36,000, well, they're all competing for the same amount of spots. The admissions rate goes down. You know, this is just more and more people who are applying to the school. And so impossible would be a 0% admissions rate, right? If it was really impossible, then nobody would be getting into these schools. It's difficult, yes, but it's far from impossible. So here's the good news. If you are qualified and you have an awesome application, you'll get into a great school. That's just a fact, right? If you write an application that will knock the socks off of admissions committees and you're a qualified student, you will get into a great school, likely a great Ivy League school. That's the good news. Nobody with, as we like to say, the goods gets rejected across the board. It just doesn't happen. If you've created a fantastic application that really shows you as a person, you're going to get into a good school. So that impossible does not become a factor anymore. It's really something to get excited about, that, hey, look, if I do this process right, I can get into a fantastic college. And I think that's something to really get excited about. So let's talk about what admissions committees are looking for. So when they read these applications that you're going to send in, what are they looking for? 3 things they're looking for. They're looking for intelligence, right? Smarts, book smarts, a lot of numbers, distinction. We'll talk about this. This is what, where you stand out from the crowd, and a unique point of view, right? This is a unique perspective on the world, that you see the world differently than most other people. So let's break it down and talk about each one of these one at a time. Let's first talk about intelligence. It's what I like to call the steak, right? So this is the meat of your application, right? It's solid grades, of course, yeah, but that's the start of it. You have to also have excellent test scores. And what solid grades and excellent test scores really are is they're proof of hard work. They're proof that you've achieved a level of academic excellence. That's great. Colleges and Ivy League schools, they love to see that. But still, even beyond that, a considerate, thoughtful application, that is the biggest mark of true intelligence. And we'll get to how to create a great application further on in the presentation. But just to begin with, the stake is just, it's mostly the numbers, it's grades, it's scores, it's proof that you've got a certain level of intelligence, and that's great. But again, that's not everything, because what's even more important is this next one, which is distinction, right? This is what I like to call the sizzle, right? If you've heard the expression, you're selling the sizzle and not the steak. Well, in this case, you're selling the sizzle and the steak, right? So the sizzle is what makes you exceptional, right? It's your grades and your test scores, that's not enough. The Ivy League, they reject thousands upon thousands of valedictorians every year, right? Because they've had solid grades, but they lack distinction. They lack the sizzle. So what can be classified as the sizzle? So it can be a unique skill or talent, such as musical ability, athletic skill, original research, a certain expertise, or really anything that makes you stand out. So it's that one thing that says, hey, this applicant is different from the rest. They do something that is different. They've really committed themselves to playing this instrument and being one of the best at it. They've committed themselves to this sport or to this research, or they've won some national science fair prize. Those things all classify as sizzle. It's because you're really trying to prove to these admissions committees that you are exceptional, that you have intelligence, that you have the steak, but you also have the sizzle on top of it, that you are exceptional. And the third thing, and this is equally important as distinction, is a unique point of view. And I cannot stress this enough. And this is something that people don't realize when they're applying to colleges. And I like to call this the aroma. It's what makes you irresistible to admissions committees, right? You have the steak, you have the sizzle, and then you have the aroma. It's what entices you. When you have that big juicy steak there on the table, the smell of it is what entices you to want to dive in. So what the unique point of view is, it's how you see the world differently than others, right? It's you have a unique perspective. And you may say to yourself, well, no, I don't have a unique perspective. There's a million people who see the world the same way that I do, and that's completely wrong. And if you can just tap into what it is that makes you see the world differently, you will be heads and shoulders above the rest in your application. So in your point of view, you have to ask yourself two questions. What has this point of view taught me? The way that I see the world, what has it taught me? And also, how has it informed me as a person? So how has my view of everything around me informed me as a person? And we want to hope, our big hope is that it made you more mature, wiser, and able to see the world in a unique way, right? Admissions committees love to see that your point of view has led to growth, that the way you see the world has led to some sort of maturity, that because you see the world in this unique way and you've had this unique experience, you've grown from it, you've matured. There's nothing more enticing to an admissions committee than that, and that's why I like to call it the aroma. So let's think about an example of two people who have the same experience and how they can have a different POV. Okay, so say let's call them John and Joe, right? So John and Joe both moved, say during freshman year of high school, they moved to a completely different town across the country. Okay, so John has taken this and he has just been angry about it, and he misses his old town and he hates his new town, and he doesn't like anything about it, and has sort of shut himself out. Well, that's not a successful point of view. Joe, on the other hand, was upset at first. Of course, he misses his friends, he misses his way of life, and hey, it took some time to get adjusted. It took some time to figure out his new surroundings. But once he did, he figured out, yeah, there are pros and cons of everywhere I live, and that this place is actually a special place too, for different reasons than the last place I lived was special. And I've grown from it. And Joe would say I've grown from it, and I've uh, I've had a good worldly experience, and that's my point of view, is that I've moved from a town, and it's changed me, and I'm the better because of it. I'm still me, but I've learned how to adapt to my environment. Now that's a successful point of view, and that's a potential essay for an application, and that's one that the admissions committee would jump for joy at, because it shows growth, it shows change. So you can see how the same experience, you can create two different point of views. So let's recap this quickly. Let's think about the three things that every admissions committee is looking for, right? So we have intelligence, right? That's the meat of it, the steak. But it's not enough, because we have distinction, that's the sizzle, that's what sets you apart from the rest. And what we just talked about is your unique point of view, the aroma, what makes you irresistible to the admissions committee. And the one thing that I want to stress is that these three things add up to something very important. So this is what I've sort of been driving towards the entire time. What are these schools looking for above all else? It's got to be something, right? It's got to be something tangible that we can put into words. And basically what they're looking for students who will contribute to their university, period. That's what they're looking for in every potential application. They're looking to create diverse student populations with students who will contribute to their university. Now you might say it's selfish. Of course it's selfish, but hey, you're going to get a lot out of your time at the university too, right? You're going to add to the university community, and you're also going to take things away from it. It's really the best sort of reciprocal relationship. So now let's clarify what do I mean by contribute to their university? Are you gonna, go to their school and work as a janitor in the cafeteria, cleaning things up? No, that's not what I mean by contribute to the university. These admissions committees, when they're reviewing your application, they're looking for students who will do a few things. They'll become campus leaders in political groups, student groups. Students will further scientific research. And this is a big thing for these schools. A lot of Ivy League schools have graduate schools attached that do very important research and groundbreaking research. And who do you think helps out in these labs and in these settings? Who do you think helps out these brilliant professors who do this sort of research? The students. The students are a crucial part of it. So when you read in the newspaper that a study came out of Harvard that said X, Y, and Z, chances are there were students involved at many points of that study. And there was obviously, of course, a brilliant professor instructor who was steering the entire thing. Another thing that universities are looking for is they're looking for people who are going to be great roommates. And you might laugh at that, but that is a genuine concern. That is something when I interview students and I have to fill out an assessment of their character, that's one thing I specifically have to address. Do I think this person would be a great roommate? Because if you're not going to be, then you're really going to be taking away from the university rather than adding to it. And further, beyond the life of the university, these colleges are looking for people who are going to be future leaders in business, technology, and the political world. So it looks good when the CEO of a Fortune 500 company says, hey, I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to Princeton. It looks good when you hear that Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg went to Harvard, even though they dropped out, but that's a different story. But it still looks good that they say that they have this affiliation with such a great university. And the final thing that I mean by contribute to their university is that you're going to become wildly successful and give back to them. Money, services, a visiting lecture. But a lot of times, they're looking for money. They have billion-dollar endowments to maintain, and once you graduate, you should be grateful for the education that you've given them, and you should give back to them, and that's what they're looking for. That's a small one, but that's a consideration in the future. So if admissions committees are considering your future as well as your past, right? They're considering what kind of student you're going to be and what kind of future leader in the world you are, then that must mean one very, very important thing. And this is something most people don't point out when thinking about your application. It's that potential is just as important as track record. I cannot stress this enough. So when people are reviewing your application, you have your track record, which is sort of where you've been. It's a record of what you've done. I mean, that's a lot of what your application is. But one thing that they will argue about and they will debate about is, does this student show potential? Are they bound for great things? Will they help the university community? Will they change the world? That, to an admissions committee, is just as important as where you've been. So that's something to always keep in mind. It's not just who you are now. They're trying to consider who you are going to be in the future. And one way they can do that is by really delving deep into your application and in your interview and seeing if there's evidence that you do have this potential for greatness. So, okay, you say, how do I dazzle the admissions committee, right? How do I tell them, hey guys, you need to accept me. I need to be a part of your university. So that's easy. I mean, you just create an incredible application, right? Duh, simple. It's okay. It's not so easy, but in my opinion, nothing worthwhile is ever easy. So what I'm here to do now is walk you through the basics. I've told you what they're looking for, and now I'm going to tell you how to create a great application. So the application is divided into 6 parts, right? You have your standardized test scores. Those are the numbers. We talked about the grades, also numbers. You have your extracurricular activities, what you do outside of school. You have teacher recommendations, and you have personal statements and essays, and then you also have your interview. So I'm going to break down each one of these one by one and address each of them and how you can best create that part of your application. But one thing I want to give a little word of warning before we go any further, this is very important, is that there's no single part of the application that will make or break you. This is a big misconception in the college admissions world, that, oh, if I don't do well in the interview, that's it, my application's done. Or if my SAT scores aren't as high as I want to be, my application's done. That's just not true, right? Ideally, you want to be strong in each area. You don't want to be weak in any of these areas. But if you're weak in one area, you need to be that much stronger to compensate in other areas, and you need to give some sort of explanation to why you're weak in that one certain area. But really, the admissions committee, they look at the application as a whole, and each part is equally important to them. So let's first talk about standardized test scores. This is also not the most important part of the application, but the part that I like to say that people stupidly worry the most about. And, you know, I just said no part of the application will make or break you, and this is most true about standardized test scores. And so why do people worry about these so much? Because they're tangible things, they're numbers. We feel like we have some sort of control over them. Oh, I got a 2100 on the SATs, I can control that, I can make it better. I was sitting there taking the test, and this is a physical number, it's a marker of who I am. The problem is that admissions committees, they care less and less about them every year. They care about you as a person, and you are, in fact, much more than just a grouping of numbers. There are actually schools, very good schools, such as Middlebury and Sarah Lawrence, that aren't even accepting SAT scores anymore because they've just completely put it out of their application as a whole. And so if SATs were so important, you know, then why do people with 2400s, perfect scores, get rejected from Ivy League schools every year? I mean, the reason is they've got the steak, right, but they don't have the sizzle and the aroma. So if, say you reach a certain level, if you get above 2100 on your SATs, stop worrying. You're fine. It's great. It's not going to, you know, they're just going to look at your scores, say they have, you know, John or Jane has the proper score, and then they're going to move along. But if you don't reach your target scores, you know, it really isn't the end of the world. You want to get the rest of your application right, and you also want to figure out where it's best for you to apply. Like if you really don't have, if you have, you know, 1600 on your SATs, I mean, that's probably in general just like a marker that, you know, you shouldn't be applying to Ivy League schools, but start figuring out where you should be applying to. You want to get your application right. You want to get everything else right, and you want to plan accordingly. So, but if your scores are low and you think you can improve, which, you know, in my experience, you can always improve on standardized test scores, there are things you can do. You can get a prep book, you can take a class, work hard to, you know, get your scores up, and then hit that certain lever that you're reaching for, and then relax. Focus on the other parts of the application. I can't tell you how many applicants I've seen who spend an insane amount of time on SAT prep and worrying about SAT stuff when they really should be spending more time on the rest of their application. But again, all this being said, the safest way to go about this is just to crush your standardized test to make sure you do as good as you possibly can. So let's talk a little bit about grades. So this is the record of your hopefully stellar academic performance, right? So this is a by the numbers account of your studies. This is the track record we talked about when I said potential is just as important as track record. So your third year of secondary school, your junior year, is most important to the admissions committee. It's what they look at the most. But ideally, your grades should be strong across the board, right? All throughout high school. You should have solid grades. And if they're not, if your grades aren't solid, there should be an upward trajectory. It means that if you weren't so great in your first year, you should be getting better and better each year. And showing significant improvement is good. And there's a place, every application to Ivy League schools has a little place that says, if you feel like your grades don't exactly reflect who you are, uh, or don't exactly reflect you as a potential candidate, explain why. And you should really take, if your grades aren't good at any point, you should really take the chance to explain this. You know, were you going through a rough emotional time? Did you have family troubles, personal issues? Really don't be afraid to tell them about it. Like I said, admissions committees are not thoughtless automatons. They're emotional people. They're sympathetic. But again, that being said, don't make shabby excuses. And you know, these are all strategies if your grades are not great at any point, but again, ideally your grades hopefully are solid across the board. That is the best thing, and that's the thing admissions committees appreciate the most. So let's talk about extracurricular activities, and I like to call this the part of the application that people stupidly worry the least about. I can't tell you how many potential applicants who just don't put enough time to extracurricular activities and they don't think it's a big deal. Well, I'm here to tell you they are a big deal. So the questions are, why do these matter? Admissions committees, they want to know you do something well other than academics, right? So we know you're strong in academics, we know you have great grades, but the world after college is much more than academics. So you need to show them that you can do something else, right? And your participation in extracurricular activities, it's indicative of your future performance within the university community. Remember how I told you that potential is just as important as track record? Well, one of the things they use to gauge potential is your extracurricular participation. And here we want to talk about quality, not quantity. You should love what you do. Admissions committees really like to see that when you devote your time and it's valuable, like you're not spreading yourself too thin. You're not doing 100 different activities and just spending half an hour a week on them, but rather you're doing 2 or 3 things and you're putting a lot of time into them, and that time is meaningful. And admissions committees, that's huge for them. And it shows you have important qualities, leadership and empathy. I mean, to be strong in any extracurricular, you sort of need these 2 qualities. You need leadership. You need to show that you can lead a group of your peers, and also empathy, that you care about things other than yourself. You care about the community. You care about a certain issue. You care about politics. You care about making the school a better place. I mean, those are all really important things. And so I'm always asked, what should I participate in? What sort of activities should I participate in? And I can't answer that unless I know more about you. But ideally, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be meaningful to you, and you should be able to write an application essay about it. It should be a group that changed your life. It made your life better. A musical group, community organization, a business activity, volunteer group, athletics. The point is, it was meaningful to you. It had meaning, and again, you grew because of it. You grew. Maybe being a part of this group, maybe you helped out in a community service group that gave you a unique point of view. You were raised in a different part of town, and you helped out in a less fortunate part of town, and that gave you a unique perspective. Fantastic. Write an essay about that. That's what admissions committees love to hear. So next, let's move on to teacher recommendations. And these are what I like to call the unsung hero of the application, but only when they're done correctly. So the big important disclaimer I've got to give you, and hopefully you're smarter than this anyway, but you have to get someone to write these on your behalf. Seriously, I can't stress this enough. You should never write them yourselves, or have someone like a service write it on behalf of a teacher. Ever. Don't ever do this. And the reason is admissions committees, they can smell these coming a mile away. They can tell when a recommendation is not genuine. And a recommendation that's not genuine or forged or written by you, will kill your application. Like I said, I said before, there's nothing that can make or break your application. Well, this is one thing that can break it. I mean, when you do it wrong, this will kill your application. Your application will be dead in the water if you write the recommendation yourself or have somebody write it on behalf of a teacher. And so why is that? Why is the recommendation is important? It's worth its weight in gold. It's an adult vouching for how great you are, right? It's them telling you how fantastic you are as a student, and that means a lot to the admissions committee to hear it from somebody else how great you are, because obviously your whole application is hopefully you telling how great you are. It's good for them to hear it from someone else. When I was at Harvard, I interacted during my 4 years with one of the admissions officers when I was volunteering there, and she had pointed out to me that she remembered the recommendation that one of my teachers wrote for me. That's how moving it was. And I mean, what can you say about that? That is just, you can't ask for anything more, and you should really, I have to stress that you can't be afraid to ask someone to write these on your behalf. They have to. You can't write it, or else you will, sink your application like the Titanic. So don't have someone write it on your behalf, and you never want to fake it because they can smell this coming a mile away. So next, let's talk about personal statement essays. So this is the best way of the admissions committee to get to know you, and hopefully not some ghostwriter, right? So this is a place for your personality to emerge. This is where you shine through, you transcend the numbers, you become something more than just statistics on paper. The personal statement and the essays, they shape the application reader's view of who you are. And a fact that I need to point out is that admissions committees, they take 5 to 10 minutes. That's not a lot of time to initially review these. So you've got to hook them. You've got to make a memorable impression quickly, right? You want to create an advocate for your case, because a member of the admissions committee is going to present this application, and they're going to be the ones going to bat, arguing for whether or not you should be admitted into their university. And the assessment of your personality is in large part based on your essays. What did you choose to write about? What did you say in them? Is there evidence of maturity, of growth, of leadership skills? All those things are going to be assessed by the admissions committee. So the question is, how do you create a fantastic essay? There's a few pieces of advice I would give you. The first is take risks. 99 times out of 100, the application reader is going to read some boring essay topic. Oh, I went here and it was great, and I'm such a great person because of it, and that's all very boring and it's not really unique. You have to remember, a school like Harvard is reviewing 35 to 40,000 applications a year, and you need to stand out. And if you're boring, if you don't take risks, you're not going to stand out. Second thing I would advocate is showing emotion, showing a softer side. Do you have a regret, a vulnerability, a passion? If you can be really genuine and be really honest in your application and really open up and show an emotional side of you, bad or good, that's something that will stick with the admissions committee, that they will remember. And so, above all these things like taking risk and showing emotion, you need you want to be memorable. Because if you're boring, they're not going to remember you. If they read your application and they're just scanning through it and nothing's really sticking out to them, then that's not good. You want them to remember you. You want them to remember, oh, this is John's application, and he was fantastic. And the other thing is, tell about an experience that changed you, right? We talked about unique point of view. So what's an experience that gave you a unique point of view? Admissions committees love to hear about change. They love to hear about maturity. They love to hear that you had an experience that gave you one of these kind of unique perspectives. That's a very good essay topic. But again, be genuine about it, because you don't want to come off as, you know, trite or that you're not being truthful about it. So as long as you can be genuine and talk about an experience that changed you, all the better. So now let's talk about the interview. So this is the one-on-one assessment of your character. I do these every year. I've already done one for Harvard just a few weeks ago, and they are important. They're an important part of your application. So the first thing I would say is practice, 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 right? You need to practice, especially if you're a foreign applicant and English is not your first language. You need to practice. But the important thing is you can't come off as being rehearsed, right? So you're not practicing for a play. You're not practicing like you're reading lines. You should be practicing, you know, just general conversation. And the one important thing I need to stress is this: it's not a job interview. You know, it should be it should be a conversation. You should be exchanging ideas. Interviewers love for you to feel like you're an equal, to feel like, you know, they can chat with you about any sort of topic that comes up, and you know, that you can exchange ideas about it. You don't have to necessarily agree, but you're having a discussion. So when an interview is, in quotes, just question and answer, this is a really bad thing. So if I'm the interviewer and I'm having to ask you, so how did you spend last summer? And you give me a quick answer. And I say, okay, you know, what's your favorite class? And you give me one quick answer. Okay, what's your least favorite class? I mean, that is very negative, because at that point, I'm not having a conversation with you. I'm just asking questions and getting answers, and that's not how the interview should go. So a big part when I'm giving an interview, when anybody's giving an interview, is the interviewer is really assessing if you're a good fit for their university, because the interviewer is an alum. They've been there. They know what it's like, and they're trying to see whether it's right for you. And when the interviewer writes the report, the interviewer postulates a few things. What kind of student will this applicant be? What would they add to the campus? Remember, we talked about potential is just as important as track record. And again, like I said before, what kind of roommate would he or she be? This is a genuine concern. So these three things, in writing an interview report, I have to postulate about the student after meeting with them for an hour. So as an interviewer, you know, you tend to look for green lights, which are good things, and red flags, which are bad things. And I'll give you examples of each. So green lights are: you had an easy conversation, that the applicant was personable, likable, engaging, right? That they were outgoing but didn't seem overeager. That's huge. And also the biggest thing is if you have a diamond in the rough quality. What I mean by that is that, you know, you really see beneath the person, you see great potential. That's what a diamond in the rough is that they've had some circumstances that haven't been the easiest in their lives, but they really shine through as that they're going places in the future, and that's a huge thing in the interview. And so some red lights, you know, and again, one bad thing can sour a perfect interview. If you're narcissistic, if you come off as full of yourself, you know, it sounds like you're bragging about your accomplishments. If you're unstable, if you seem like you're, you know, on emotionally very shaky ground, because again, this factors into what kind of roommate would this person be. If you're too shy or reserved, if I feel like when I'm interviewing you, I'm having to just chip away and just continually ask you questions and try to get you to open up, that's a bad thing. And if it's difficult to maintain a conversation, that's a bad thing. If you know, if it's hard to speak like as if we were just speaking, you know, as two friends. If I feel too much like I'm getting very short answers from you, if the conversation is just not going well, that's a red flag. And so The last thing I'll say about interviews, and these are a few important notes for foreign applicants, and Ivy League schools, they have interviewers all over the world. So you might not get interviewed, but you need to plan on being interviewed. I know for a school like Harvard, the interview, they try to interview everybody that they possibly can. And they have a network of alumni all over the entire world. So I would say plan on being interviewed. And the biggest thing, you need to be confident in English. Your English doesn't have to be perfect, but what you're basically showing the interviewer is that, hey, I can handle college in America. I'm confident in conversational English, and that means I can take a class in English and write papers in English. As long as you show that level of confidence, that's great. And so how do you achieve this level of confidence? If you're not confident right now, practice, 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 right? You have to practice. And there are good ways to practice for an interview and bad ways to practice for an interview if you're a foreign applicant. A good way is to talk to native English speakers, right? To talk to people who you can just have conversations with, who've grown up speaking English. Another thing is to learn how Americans think, right? But you don't have to imitate it, right? You don't want to come off as trying to sound like you're an American. If you're in China, that doesn't make sense. The admissions committee in an interview would rather see that you are from China and that you have a unique perspective from where you've come from, not that you're necessarily thinking like an American. But it doesn't hurt to know how Americans think in general. And the last way to practice for an interview is to build your confidence, right? To make sure that conversationally you feel good about it. And in this way, once your confidence is built, your personality can shine through, and then you won't end up being too reserved in the interview. And so a couple of bad ways to practice to practice with non-native English speakers who are looking to take your money. I mean, they're all over the world. They'll try to tell you things about conversational English. They're just patently untrue, and they're just looking to take your money. And it's never a good situation, especially to practice with someone who's just not really a native speaker. And the other bad way is to rehearse as if this were an acting performance, like to memorize lines and to act as if you were going to be performing this on stage. That's terrible, and I can tell you from personal experience as an interviewer, anytime I encounter that, I mean, I will always then try to throw the applicant a curveball. And because when I sense that they have everything that prepared that they want to talk about, well, I'm going to throw a wrench in there, and I'm going to want to talk about something else. And a lot of times when an applicant is way too rehearsed, then they'll fall apart once I change the subject. So it's not good to rehearse as if it were a performance. It's good to plan on this being a conversation, a free-flowing exchange of ideas. So let's recap the application. So we have the standardized tests. Best thing to do is crush them, then you don't have to worry about them anymore. Grades, you want to keep them high, or you want to offer an explanation for why they weren't high at a certain point, or why you showed an upward trajectory of improvement. You have your extracurriculars. You want quality of these, not quantity, and they're very, very important in showing your potential as a future student and that you can do something other than academics. So you have teacher recommendations. Again, do not fake these. They need to be genuine. A good recommendation is worth its weight in gold. And you have your personal statement and essays. These are windows into your soul. These show who you are as a person. They should jump off the page, and they should make you give a fuller perspective of you as a student rather than just numbers. And finally, the interview. It should be an intelligent conversation, a free-flowing exchange of ideas. It shouldn't be question and answer, shouldn't be rehearsed. And again, it's an important part of your application, and the interview report gets weighed right in there with everything else. And if you're a foreign applicant, plan on being confident in conversational English. So I want to end this with a final thought. And I want to talk something about global campuses, because this is something that's very important in today's world. You know, diversity matters. Colleges are looking to build diverse global campuses. So I'm going to give you a few statistics here. So the trend on Ivy League campuses has been towards accepting more and more qualified students every year. So I'm going to throw some stats in here. Harvard, 20% of students at Harvard, not just undergraduate, I'm talking about the graduate, the entire university, 20% are international students. That's a fifth of the entire university. That is a pretty staggering number. 50 years ago, that was not the case. Even 10 years ago, that was not the case. And if you look at Princeton, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, Cornell, Columbia, and Stanford, I mean, the numbers are trending higher every year, that they accept more and more international students. And like I said, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, this was just not the case. And so why are they doing this? Why are they accepting more students from around the world? Well, I'm going to give you a little case study of, you know, one of my best friends from college. He was my freshman year roommate, and he's one of the greatest guys I've ever met. So this is Adrian. This is one of my good friends. He's what I like to call the model of a global student, right? This is what Ivy League universities are looking for when they accept international students. So he was born in Malaysia, and his unique perspective was that he was the oldest of 7 children, and he didn't come from a wealthy family. Both of his parents worked full-time jobs. They worked very hard to give him the opportunity to study abroad. And so he was accepted to Harvard. He was my freshman year roommate. We were friends throughout all 4 years. He graduated from Harvard in 2007 after 4 years that honestly, you know, changed him, and they changed him for the better. They also changed me for the better. I think we both emerged as more mature, more intelligent people. So from Harvard, Adrian went to work for Boston Consulting Group in New York City for a few years. Then after that, he worked for Boston Consulting Group in Shanghai for a few years because he is fluent in not only English and Malay, but also in Mandarin Chinese. So he has a stronghold on that. Then he brought it all back to Harvard and went to Harvard Business School and graduated this past spring from Harvard Business School. And now he works for a hedge fund in Manhattan. So what he did from this entire experience, you know, Harvard actually changed him for the better. Adrian realizes it, and what does Adrian do? Adrian gives back to Harvard. He's so grateful for the opportunities they've provided him, not once but twice. He's grateful for his education. So that is what universities want. That's what they want from a global student, and that's what I mean when I say they're trying to create global communities. So let's give a final recap. Let's talk about what we learned today. So number one, Ivy League schools want applications with intelligence, distinction, and unique POVs, right? The steak, the sizzle, and the aroma. And the admissions committee accept people who will add to their university community, right? Like people who will make their college a better place. And like I said before, and this is a point that I will harp on again and again, potential is just as important as track record in your application. And in your application, that's your chance to shine. It's to genuinely show who you are. It's to make yourself stand above all the rest. And lastly, a global perspective can be a very, very good thing, especially in an Ivy League university setting. And now I'm just going to quickly get to a few frequently asked questions. These are 3 questions that I get asked more often than most. So the first question is, what's the right school for me? Okay, and I get asked this a lot. I get asked this a lot by people who I know very well, and I get asked this a lot by people who I've just met. And the answer is, go to the best school you can get into. That's the answer. But again, don't go to a subpar university just because it's in America or just because you can get in. you know, the right school for you, when you're talking about the Ivy League, there is no wrong school. Each school is going to afford you with incredible experiences, access to world-renowned professors, and there's no wrong choice. But, you know, if you get into two equally good schools, say Harvard and Princeton, then you can decide which is right for you. At that point, I would say, you know, try to talk to students, visit the campus, research more into it. But then, you know, you can't make a wrong decision there. If you're deciding between Harvard and Princeton, you know, there's no wrong decision. So overall, I would say the right school for you is the best possible school that you can get into, because it, you know, especially for Ivy League schools, the name and the reputation matters. You're going to get a first-rate education, and then the name and the reputation of the school matters in the future. So the next question is, why should I go to an Ivy League school? What if a smaller university is offering me a scholarship? Okay, so I'm going to pose this in a different hypothetical, which is much easier to answer, but I feel it's the same exact question. So I give you a choice. You want to go vacation in Hawaii, but you'll have to pay for it, or you vacation in the middle of a bone-dry desert for free. You know, which would you choose? I mean, the decision is obvious, right? Ivy League schools offer two important things that lesser schools do not. First-rate education. This is helpful in every aspect of your life. Like I said, my 4 years at Harvard, they changed me for the better. And the second thing is reputation. This is helpful in your post-grad career. It doesn't hurt to say you went to these Ivy League schools, to have that on your record. That's, you know, unfortunately, that's a real thing, that the reputation of these schools is very important. So say, you know, you get into an Ivy League school, but some small unknown university in America is offering you a full ride. That might seem enticing, but frankly, that school doesn't have the same education or reputation as an Ivy League school. So 100 times out of 100, I would choose the Ivy League school. I think that's just the smarter decision for your future, period. And lastly, this one's for foreign applicants. Should I try to sound American in my application? And my answer to this is you shouldn't try to sound like anything. You should sound like yourself. You know, it's important to be yourself. You want to make sure you're showcasing the best version of you, right? That you are showing who you are, and you know, even if it's a bit rough around the edges. And there's one thing, you know, I can say for certain is they hate, admissions committees hate applications from foreign students that seem sanitized, overly polished, and written by third party. That last one, if it's written by a third party, your application will get tossed if they suspect that. And so if you are from a different country other than America and you present an application with sanitized, perfect, you know, American English, that might raise a red flag. What matters, you know, the great equalizer at all of these schools, whether or not you have a perfect command of English or not, it matters that you're smart, confident, and unique. That's the equalizer. Every student that you run into on these campuses, each one is smart, confident, and unique. That's what got them in. And finally, universities are building global campuses. So diversity, being different, that can be a good thing. So don't shy away from it. Don't try to sound American just for the sake of being American. Schools now are building global campuses. They want your unique perspective. And so with that, I want to just say thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best of luck in your college application adventures. And I also want to say that if you have questions or concerns, please, please, please feel free to email me. My email is steven@admissionado.com, or if you want some more general information, you can email info.cn@admissionado.com. And like I said, any questions, any concerns, whatever, you know, whatever, no question is too large or small. I will try to tackle them all. Just let me know, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And thanks for tuning in today. I've had a great time, and I hope you've learned some valuable lessons. All right, so take care.